The views discussed in this conversation are the views of individuals and not of Arrington Capital. This podcast is provided solely for informational purposes and is not financial, legal, tax, or investment advice. The participants of this podcast are not recommending any particular security, protocol, token, financial instrument, or other tradable asset or any investment strategy. It is not offering to sell or soliciting to buy any security or asset.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Pirate Pod from Arrington Capital. Today we have Julio Vieira with us from Kluster.AI. We invested in Kluster, I believe it was August over the summer. It came from the Moonsong Labs ideation team. And in a nutshell, it's a decentralized distributed AI platform that allows developers to run and fine-tune large AI models without being limited to computational resources that exist. Julio's leading the team. They're orchestrating this huge global network of GPU providers. There's some abstraction that takes place to remove a lot of the complexity of running AI on a distributed network that makes for better performance and allows for better resource utilization. Instead of focusing on your own GPUs, you can build infra that can support a really decentralized network. Julio's going to walk us all into that because I probably got half that wrong, but that's why he's here. But as we get started, Julio, I want you to tell us a little bit about your path and how you ended up at Kluster. What's your background? What's your journey into crypto?
Hi, Kelly. Thanks for having me here. You actually got everything pretty right, so spot on. Thanks a lot for the intro. Yeah, I'm Julio, the founder of Kluster and CEO. I'm a developer at heart. I have been coding since I was 13. I learned myself at the school library. And I didn't have a computer back then, so I was like coding on a notebook and running all these algorithms myself in my head until I finally got a computer. And then I did all sorts of crazy, projects during my teenage, like an address book or a way to simulate like rocket launches and stuff like this. My science project at school, all of that were software that I built. So when I graduated from college, I pretty much knew that I wanted to be an entrepreneur, right? And that's what I've been doing through my entire career. I've been either in small companies, startups that I joined very early, or companies that I have created my own. I've been fortunate enough to be part of multiple acquisitions throughout my career. Through my journey, I ended up, in the Web3 space and Kluster.
How long have you been in the Web3 space?
So Kluster is my first endeavor into the Web3 space professionally, but I've been in one way or another involved since 2012, right? I've been initially, like most of us, in Bitcoin, and then when Ethereum started to become, popular, playing with Ethereum and doing smart contracts, like early days.
And so you've really only been full-time in Web3 since a year or so now when you made the move into Kluster. Why now?
Yeah, I guess there's several reasons, right? One of them is business oriented. I think, a year and a half ago, I was talking to Derek Yu at Moonsong Lab, and we we connected pretty often, and we started to talk about the GPU shortage, right? Like Nvidia stock was at an all-time highest revenue record, and there was a big GPU shortage, which is still today, but back then was like much more pronounced. And we were trying to find a decentralized solution for that problem, right? Like how can we, mesh multiple GPUs together and create a network of GPUs to solve for AI? And started to look at the ecosystem in Web3. Web3 is the perfect way to do a decentralized network, right? So we started to look at the ecosystem and found that there were many players trying to solve the problem, but as a GPU rental service. And we saw the opportunity of why don't we do an AI as a service over a decentralized mesh of GPUs, and that's how everything started there.
Crypto and AI, that narrative really captured attention in 2024, which is when you were fundraising. What was that like?
Yeah, certainly AI and crypto are the most popular terms nowadays in the tech scene. When we raise money, the conversation was more about agents, and agents is still, you know, the most popular usages of AI in crypto, right? Autonomous agents that do financial transactions or make decisions within a specific blockchain, managing assets or stuff like this. Our value proposition is different. Our value proposition is large language models from the blockchain, because that differentiation among everyone else I think we got pretty good interest from the investors.
I want to do a little bit of context setting. How do you think about the crypto AI stack, very broadly speaking, right? You've got data, you've got compute, you've got the models that run on top of them. Like, how do you think about that whole setup of what it is, and not just for Cluster, but how Cluster can serve what's happening to mature that area right now?
Yeah, so the space that Cluster is playing is large language models for blockchains. The technology is not ready right now for us to do AI on chain. Simply, it is computationally expensive. Validating the work, there's different strategies for validating the work, but the technology is not ready yet to do AI on chain. So Cluster offers a way to do AI off chain, but with all of the on-chain security of like proof of work, uh, distributed of rewards, and payments will be offered through the blockchain, right? Um, the biggest challenge for AI and blockchain at this point is validation or making sure the players in the network are honest, are behaving honestly, right? And for this, you need to have an incentive for them to do the right work. So if each of them are going to be doing a piece of the puzzle on the AI compute, each of them need to be behaving correctly. And validating that each of them are doing the right work is really difficult on AI. There are many complications on why. Well, one of them is because the models are not deterministic. The second is because you need tens, maybe hundreds of players to solve one inference request, right? And each of them have to be audited, and you have to make sure that all of them are behaving correctly.
So let's dive in on Cluster. What is Cluster? Is it doing exactly what you just said?
Correct. Cluster is a two-sided marketplace. On one end, we have GPU suppliers who have incentives to bring and provide compute into the network. And on the other side, we have developers who have AI needs and they want to run AI algorithms or they want to execute inference requests for fine tuning, right? So what we offer for developers is something called adaptive inference. And adaptive inference is segmented in four different offerings, right? The first one is real-time inference. Basically, developers can submit a real-time inference request to the system, and the system will respond as fast as possible. This is ideal to do chatbots or anything that is user-facing, end user-facing, where there is like interaction from the user. Um, then we offer something called asynchronous inference, that is a new offering on the market. It's basically an inference request that you don't need right away as a developer. You may need it in an hour or 3 hours or 10 hours, right? So many back office processes on businesses, for example, data analysis, report generation, forecast for quarters, like all of this doesn't need to be generated right away, but it's expensive to generate because there is a lot of data that has to go into the large language model. And with asynchronous inference, what allows Cluster to do is plan the execution ahead of time. So let me give you an example. Let's say that you want to do analysis on the portfolio companies that you have invested. You run this data through Cluster and you say, hey, Cluster, I need this in 24 hours, right? What you will get in return is a very cheap price per token because you're allowing Cluster 24 hours to complete the request. But the opportunity for Cluster is now, we know we have to execute this thing and we have 24 hours to do it. So let's wait until cheap compute becomes available on the network because it's fully decentralized, right? So people come in and out providing compute. So we can wait until cheap compute is available on the network and then execute your request on such compute. And that way we can give you a good price and at the same time make sure we utilize compute as much as possible. The third offering we do is called batch inference. Is offered by competitors as well. Some of them offer batch inference, and the idea is to be able to run large quantities of data on one single request. So you can have like 100,000 or a million inference requests into Cluster only with one invocation, right? So it's a very efficient way to process large quantities of data on one single request to Cluster. The fourth one is a bit different. It's fine tuning. So we are launching fine tuning within the next 2 weeks, and this will allow developers to take an existing model that is very good at general purpose usage and fine tune it for a specific purpose they need in their business, right? And one of the advantages of doing this in Cluster, well, number one is super easy and quick to fine tune a model. But second, we will not charge extra for people to run fine-tuned models as long as they're using asynchronous inference. So if you want to use a fine-tuned model and you submit an inference request that needs to be solved in 3 hours, we will not charge extra for you to run your fine-tuned model like other providers do. You only pay per token as you would pay in a reference model.
I know the fine tuning is coming on soon. Some of these are new to market, some of them are existing. Do you have use cases that you're working with or that are actually using each of these categories?
Yeah, absolutely. So for the real-time inference, we had developers building agents that use real-time difference to make different decisions. So all sorts of agents we have seen. For asynchronous inference, we're looking at really interesting use cases, right? So there are financial companies, for example, that every month they want to run all of their users' transactions through a large language model. And the idea is to classify users in different buckets and also to understand what are their spending behaviors, what credit cards can be offered to these customers with the credit limits, what are the income brackets of everyone. And these companies, we're actually working with a company right now that they have everything in-house. They have their own GPUs, they have their own DevOps team, they have their own like fine-tune infrastructure and everything, and they're paying like $50 per million token when you do all the math of everyone they have like running these models, right? With Cluster, they're gonna go down to pay $1 per million token, more or less, right? So you can say like they're saving like 50x on their inference cost.
Do you think that that's normal? 50 saving?
I think 50x is on the high end. Uh, it's the first time we see such a big number. Usually people save like 5 to 10x. That's what we've seen. For example, we're working with a translation company as well. They translate in bulk, and the expectations to their customers is translations will be available in 12 hours. So they can safely use a 6-hour completion time in Cluster, and they're saving about like 4 to 3x compared to their current provider. 50x is big, but I expect this number to be similar for companies who are managing their own infrastructure, right? Handling GPUs, number one, they're expensive, and then you need a team of people behind it. So
Real-time inference, asynchronous, batch, and fine tuning are those are going to be sort of your 4 pillar products for Cluster?
yeah, those are going to be the 4 pillar products for Q1, I would say. Fine tuning, we're also releasing within the next, I think in 2 weeks it will be fully in production, but next week we have a kind of an early access with select customers, and we're going to be doing a fine-tune model for a company that they wanted to do fine-tune models for a long time, but they didn't want to spend the money on hosting this model once it was fine-tuned. With Cluster, they will be able to host the model without extra cost.
Which one of those do you think really puts you ahead in terms of competition and what's out there, whether that's on cost or the actual decentralization behind it? Which one of those pushes you ahead of the existing options?
Look, all 4 of them are important. They all contribute a little bit to the overall solution. Our flagship offering is asynchronous inference because it's really the way for businesses to lower their cost on inference dramatically, substantially, like you said, 50x is a huge cost savings. So our flagship is asynchronous inference. However, we do support real time because for some use cases, businesses do need real time, especially when there is an end user on the other side of the screen, right? So what we want is to have a comprehensive solution for our customers to have like a Swiss army of tools that they can use to satisfy their need. If they need real time, we offer real time. If they want to save costs with huge amount of data, we have asynchronous. And then if they know in advance large quantities of data they want to process, we have batch, right? And then fine tuning is an extra cost saving because you can fine tune a small model to do a very specific job. Small models are like substantially cheaper to run than large models.
You talk a little bit about use cases. You mentioned a financial company with a huge savings on Cluster's asynchronous inference. Do you think that there are industries that are further ahead in using some of this than others?
I think AI is on its infancy. Like every company we speak to, they're mostly prototyping and ideating AI implementations on their products. What you see everywhere are chatbots or AI completion agents. For example, like if you're building a Google slide, you can say, hey, build me a Google slide that does this and that, and then it'll do the job for you. But where we're seeing a lot of innovation is in this like back office processes, right? Like I said, like financial transactions, content moderation, right? That's a big one, right? Or classification and moderation. So if you have a platform where people are submitting content themselves, like users around the world, you want to be able to moderate the content, flag sensitive content, uh, you know, the usage of specific words, calculating the sentiment on the content, the topic, all of that is super valuable, right? And it doesn't have to be processed in real time. Cost is a big driver in these decisions, right? Especially when you have huge amount of data flowing into the LLM. So to answer the question, like what we have seen is a bunch of experimentation, and companies are starting to find use cases for AI within internally in the company, no? The number one complaint we hear from people is cost. Like people are like, okay, yeah, we have this thing, we have this prototype, but we have no idea how to break even here. It's just too expensive, right?
This is all stuff that they've built internally, right? Whether it's back-end processes or customer-facing chatbot-like things. This is all stuff that a company's built internally, correct? That they would
They
use.
build internally and integrate into their offering, right? Into their product,
Yeah.
yeah. But yeah, the number one complaint is cost, right? Cost and the lack of availability of models sometimes, like the way that what I mentioned before, like maybe they want to try 5 different models in parallel and see how they perform. So it's too expensive for them to do this, and the systems are not flexible. Rate limits are also a complaint. Like there's platforms with rate limits in place, so you submit 100,000 requests, half of them fail. There's no way to recover. With asynchronous inference, this doesn't happen, right? We just like schedule your job for later, and we do complete it. So we're like targeting these business problems, right? With asynchronous inference specifically, because we can lower the cost significantly for businesses.
So you're working mostly with internal product teams or internal IT departments. Would that be correct?
Yeah, we work internally with the product teams of the companies, yeah, and
Okay.
you know, and you know, have influence in the roadmap, and you know, can give advice. Hey, you can use asynchronous inference for this, real time for that, etc.
You recently put out a blog post about adaptive inference. So walk us through that and then dive in on the Llama 3.3 models.
Yeah, so adaptive inference, like I said, is an offering of different inference variations or alternatives that can suit your needs. Like if you need real time, we provide real time. Cost savings you get with asynchronous, and large quantities of data you get with batch. Right? That's why we call it adaptive, because it adapts to your business needs. We're not restricting anyone on a specific use case, right? And obviously fine tuning as well at the end. And yeah, and the Llama models are the ones that we chose to release initially. They're highly popular, obviously trained by Meta. Especially Llama 3.3 70 billion was released a few weeks ago. You know, we've done like quality checks on it. Like there's benchmarks also all over the internet, and it performs really well, right? Very similar to the 4 or 5 billion. So those are the ones we decided to release. We have decided to start releasing a couple models per month, 2 to 4 new models per month, and we're going to be releasing new models at the end of January, and then each month subsequently. We haven't decided which yet. So right now, if you're a developer and you go to Cluster, you can pick one of the Llama models to run your inference requests, right? But we only support 3 Llama models. So we're going to be making available more models from other companies soon. And we also are going to integrate with Hugging Face, so people eventually can run any model that is available on Hugging Face. You can run in Cluster using asynchronous inference at no extra cost. There is some trickiness when doing that, if I'm allowed to expand. Because you need to optimize these models to run on a decentralized network of GPUs. So it's not just as easy as getting them and deploying them. You have to make sure they perform well on a decentralized network.
We've been talking a lot about the devs, the use cases that want to execute inference. We haven't talked much about the providers of who's executing on this. Can you talk about the other side of the cluster marketplace?
Absolutely, yeah. So the GPU suppliers we have categorized in 3 buckets. The first bucket are professional grade data centers. There are some numbers out there that tell that about 50% of the GPUs around the world are underutilized or non-utilized at all. And the reason for this is because mostly everyone is focusing on real-time inference. These GPUs need to be up and running and available for a request to come in, but they're not necessarily being used at that time, right? With asynchronous inference, what we can do is plan execution and make sure we can utilize our hardware 100% all the time, 24/7. And that allows us to run our network with much less CPUs than other people. So what we are doing with this type of suppliers is we are acquiring or renting their GPUs at a much discounted rate, right? Because the difference between us and other renters is that our rental agreement gives them the GPU back to them with 24 hours in advance. So let's say they give us a GPU for a week and then they say, hey, Cluster, we're going to need this GPU starting tomorrow. Then we just give it back to them, right? So it's a win-win situation because now they can monetize on the GPUs that were not used, and also we get compute at a discounted price. The second category of suppliers are the same type of person who would put like a mining operation on the crypto world. These are people who have access to a warehouse, they have access to power and network capabilities, and they also can buy GPUs. So we have a supplier coming online within the next month in the West Coast, and they're going to be providing 100 4090s, for example, on the network. We're talking to another supplier in Dublin. They're still not decided what NVIDIA card they're going to provide, but yeah, they're going to be coming online at some point in 2025. So these type of suppliers are more flexible in the sense that they're going to offer more compute, they're going to commit more time, the GPUs to the network, and therefore we have a more stable supply there. And then the third type of suppliers, which is something we don't support today, but we do plan to support it throughout the year, probably the second half of the year, are individual suppliers. So you have a computer at home, and it's a powerful computer used for gaming, but you want to make some money overnight while the computer is not running, and you can connect this computer to a network and get some rewards in exchange. We're talking to companies that provide, for example, gift cards. So it will be nice for them to get a gift card on their favorite game instead of just cash and things like this. So we're exploring those options. That is by far the biggest challenge on a decentralized network because latency is a big factor and you have no idea what type of network the person has at home, what kind of Wi-Fi routers, etc.
So I'm assuming most of it out of the gate for you is going through professional grade data centers.
Yes, right now most of our supply is professional grade data centers, and like I said, like we have these 4090s coming online soon on the West Coast, and then we have another of the suppliers in Dublin coming online in 2025, like the first half. They're struggling a little bit to find GPUs, and that's going back to the GPU shortage.
Yeah. How important is the element of decentralization on all the GPU suppliers to the devs and the companies that want to execute within Cluster, right? Where on the spectrum of thinking, I want to make sure this isn't all going through company XYZ data center, I want to make sure that it's a little more decentralized.
So for our Web 2 type of customers, they would prefer things to go to a professional grade data center or what we call our trusted suppliers. So it's one of the things that I see also AI in general on the crypto world being defined this year is, if we really want people to run their workloads on a decentralized network for AI, cluster or not cluster, there has to be a way for whoever is running or sending their data to choose where the data is going to end up, right? Um, uh, because they can send sensitive information to be analyzed by the LLM. So at Cluster, what we have two types of suppliers. We have the trusted supplier and untrusted supply. And trusted suppliers right now are professional grade data centers because we have agreements with them. And in the future, our customers will be able to decide whether their requests go to trusted suppliers or untrusted. And obviously, there is a price incentive there to go to untrusted. For Web3 customers, we have been talking to a few of them, and they really don't care where things are going as long as this is a decentralized world. Like they do care that things are decentralized, but not so much what type of suppliers the requests are going to.
Makes sense. Do you think that at some point it just becomes the norm that wherever you're running these models is through decentralized networks and it would be near impossible to track down where they even were run through?
Yeah, so look, centralized and decentralized, I think, will always coexist. I think decentralized gives you some benefits, again, like being opportunistic in compute price and offer lower price in many ways. I do think that it will become the norm that whoever is sending data to the network to be run on a model can choose what tier of security or what tier of privacy or trust level their data is going to, right? Because otherwise companies are going to be very, careful of where they send their data.
Do you think developers are mostly making the choice based on cost right now, and will that be the case in the future?
We have identified three different roles in companies, right, in customers. So who is really making the call regarding cost is the engineering manager. So it's not the developer itself. The engineering manager is the one calling the shots on like, okay, um, I'm gonna make the decision based on cost. The developer makes the decision mostly on ease of use of the tool, how friendly the API and the developer console is, and how easy is to migrate things from existing providers to Cluster, which we make extremely easy. Basically, it's a drop-in replacement for other providers, right? You just change the endpoint, and then you're up and running in Cluster. The third role in companies is the product owner, because they are the ones influencing the roadmap in companies, and basically they're the ones saying like, I want an AI feature, right, on my company. So I think those three are really important when making a decision to develop a solution in Cluster, and we're tailoring for the three of them.
What do you think the crypto AI narrative looks like by the end of 2025?
I think more AI will start happening on chain. I think as technology develops and new ways of validating work, models are getting smaller, and you have like specialized models that are smaller and can fit in reasonable computers at this point and do a good job. We're gonna start seeing more and more AI happening on chain, which I think is the holy grail of like doing AI and crypto. Like everything happens on chain at some point. I think we're gonna start seeing primitive instructions on smart contracts for AI. Right? Instead of integrating with another smart contract, then you have like primitives on the smart contracts, like instructions that are AI specific. And what I already mentioned is data privacy and governance, right? I think this is extremely important for people where their data is going to and who's going to be processing the data, and some sort of control of, I know this is a decentralized network, but I would like my data to stay in a specific region in the world or be processed in a specific region in the world, or I would like only tier one suppliers who have reliable connectivity to the internet, right? I only want those to be processing my data, things like this, right? I think it will be super important for companies to adopt a decentralized network and really put real workloads, real life workloads and business workloads on AI decentralized.
Do you think that most people, even those who are not Web3 native, will be using Web3 AI agents in the future?
Yeah, that is one of our cluster's goals, right? Like our vision is that the entire AI infrastructure in cluster is powered via Web3, it's fully decentralized, right? Actually, my vision, my heart vision as a founder is, our network and our legacy should continue to exist even if our company disappears at some point, right? Like in the future, everything should continue to exist. It's fully decentralized. Nobody is like a central point or single point of failure for the network, right? And we would like all of our infrastructure to run on this protocol, right? And yes, we will cater to Web2 customers with the proper guarantees of data privacy and governance. And this is why I see that it's super important to implement this concept as well on the Web3 side of things, right? For Web2 customers, everything will be fully transparent, right? They will not even know they're interacting with a protocol behind the scenes. Web3 customers will know.
What do you think the time horizon is of that world where humans won't have any ability to stop some of the more decentralized AI that's happening?
Yeah, I think that's on the topic of agents, right? So there's a lot of conversations about like a runaway situation with agents in which you have an agent that is creating another agent that is smarter, and then that one creates another one that is more intelligent, and then you have like the runaway chain of what can happen. It's funny because on a centralized system you always have like a breaker switch you can flip off if things go out of control, but on a decentralized system you can't, right? There's no breaker switch. I guess you could like shut down the internet somehow, like, but it would be the only way out, no? So I would say that would be my biggest concern is like this runaway situation, and I think we have no clear proposal on how to overcome that. Like at some point, there will have to be some guardrails in place for this. Um, The good news is, I think for the foreseeable future, we'll only see specialized agents that are good at one task or multiple tasks within the same industry or scope within an industry. And I do think there will be some sort of proliferation of agents that are more like a co-worker, right? Like you will have an agent that is on your company chat and you interact the whole day as if he was an employee of the company and is doing a specific job in the company, right? Even understanding human emotions and his objective in the company and his role. But like fully autonomous agent that can lead the world into a runaway situation, I think we're like many, many years away from that. So we have time to solve the problem.
So this has been the most interesting part of this conversation. I think Cluster is very elegant and very straightforward, and you've got some amazing tech underneath, but I like the doom and gloom and what the potential is. You think that 2025 is not the year we're going to see new industry association orgs pop up that create task force on how to combat runaway agents and runaway chains. That's good.
Yeah, I think we will see proposals for putting guardrails in place. I don't think we'll have agents that pose a real risk of becoming a runaway agent. At least from what I've read, it's not something that is considered a risk at this point. But long term, it is, yeah. Especially on a decentralized network.
What does the next 6 to 18 months look like for Cluster?
Yeah, so in the next 6 months, we would like to have a prototype of a protocol fully integrated with our decentralized AI engine. As I mentioned, our goal is to do AI off-chain, as especially during the time that doing it on-chain is possible technically, but it's not economically viable, right? It's just too expensive. As I mentioned, our vision is to have a protocol where people can just come and build their own AI offerings, right? People should be able to come and fine tune their models and then offer it to other people and build some sort of like company around their AI models. So, for example, let's say you wanted to build an AI company to help investors make decisions, right? And you want to fine tune a set of models for that task specifically and build some agents on top of that. So Cluster will give you all the tools. It will give you a way to find a compute. It will give you a way to exchange value and pay for inference no matter where you are in the world, and will give you the technology to host the models and fine tune those models, right? So you have basically all of your tech needs are solved for, and you have to go and find the demand and build a business around it. Like, and anyone in the world can just use Cluster for this in the future.
How can people get involved today? You're on testnet, you're on mainnet. What's coming next? You got a token that's coming soon?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, the protocol will have a prototype in 6 months. So right now we operate a decentralized network of GPUs, but we still are not out in the Web3 space with a protocol or smart contracts yet. So that's coming up in 6 months. However, we are right now designing the protocol and starting to code on it, and 6 months will be live. So look, if you want to get involved, join Cluster. We're giving everyone who joins $100 in credit for the time being. Obviously, we'll stop doing this very soon, so make sure you join right now. Follow us on Twitter because we'll be announcing a really cool contest very soon on how to use Asynchronous AI. Like we're gonna giving rewards for the best 10 implementations of Asynchronous AI or most creative, and also fine-tune models, right? Like we're gonna start doing contests on who can do the most creative fine-tune model in Cluster and showcase it.
Awesome. Julio, thank you so much for joining us on the Pirate Pod. I enjoyed hearing more about Cluster and look forward to keeping up with you over the next few months.
Thanks for having me, Keli.